What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an early preview of Showgunners, an upcoming tactical RPG with a variety of unique twists that make it an interesting title. So with this being an early preview, a PR company working for the publisher reached out to give me an early look at this game ahead of its May 2nd release. I will also be reviewing this eventually, of course a little closer to its actual release, if everything goes to plan. But today we're going to take a look at it, talk about some of the basics, what you can expect, all the usual jazz. So Showgunners, as you might have seen on screen here, takes place in a future cyberpunk dystopia where a corporation, known as the Omega Corporation, puts on a show called Homicidal All-Stars, a very high-stakes game where the contestants murder each other for a big prize. And using that general framework, developer Artificer manages to come up with something that feels pretty unique here. We move through the game in terms of what it calls episodes, or basically levels. These are a combination of isometric exploration and tactical turn-based battles. Each episode sees you moving through a sort of set course of death traps and enemies, and the exploration side of this is just that. You are free to explore while also trying to disarm various traps, find loot, or potentially take on optional objectives. You can even do things like sign autographs for the occasional fan. So in addition to having to survive the actual turn-based battles, getting hit by things during exploration will also cause you damage that has to be healed, all while a crowd cheers and an announcer sort of narrates what's going on. Though right up front, I can tell the people who are developing this are well versed in the TRPG genre, as a lot of quality of life features are here, such as fast forwarding through enemy turns or getting the exact percentage to hit chance readouts when you mouse over where you'd like to move, and more exciting things like the person running the show interjecting themselves into various fights to sort of throw out wild card mechanics like dropping explosive barrels onto the turn-based battlefield in a way that feels very natural to what this game is trying to do for you. But let's start with the basics first. There is a little bit of progression to our characters. While you'll see two people in the footage here, you will eventually get access to more and more characters to recruit to your team to play through some of the levels with, each with their own abilities. But our sort of main character here is Scarlet, and the returning champion, Marty, who is helping us out. As we participate in battles and explore the various almost obstacle course-like levels, we will be earning fame, in addition to regular experience. Regular experience will level you up, give you skill points, which lets you take up a bunch of passive abilities that let you do more with what you've got, in addition to increasing your attributes. This on top of your gear, which is things like weapons or implants, some of which is character-specific. But our fame level is perhaps the most interesting, as reaching certain levels of fame allows you to take on sponsorships, which are effectively just large passive bonuses. In some cases, these can be things like increases to experience gain or decreases to the cost of certain items, etc., etc. But certain sponsorships have a personality requirement, meaning that when you interact with fans on the course, you can sign their autographs while responding in a certain way, which contributes to your personality score, which will open up or lock you off from certain sponsorships, which is a nice sort of thematic touch to the game in terms of progression. But then we have the actual combat itself. Now this is a 2 action point system, meaning that you can move and attack generally, or potentially move twice for extra distance while also attacking. If you're using guns, you'll need to reload. Ranged weapons have a % chance to hit outside of things like grenades. You can make melee attacks, which will generally deal less damage, but are also guaranteed hits. And all the usual nice to have features are here, things like color coding the movement so you can tell where your single action point will end and the second one begins, etc. But they also try to keep things interesting, but relatively simple at the same time. For instance, some enemies will be using a certain type of armor that certain types of weapons will penetrate, such as things that break through Kevlar or other types of armor, with there also being a robust cover system in place that will reduce chance to hit, making flanking enemies relatively important. There's also a variety of difficulties to make this easier or harder on yourself, and then we get into the environmental effects. So I've mentioned exploding barrels, which are of course a classic, and the environmental traps that are in the exploration mode of the levels themselves, but there's also more level-specific things. For instance, there was a battle I was in that saw trains passing through on railways that would just insta-kill anybody who was stuck in them at the end of the turn, and all of this on top of things like optional objectives that can net you more fame, or more specific mechanics that have to be worked around, such as an enemy that will obscure themselves in smoke until they're hit with a melee attack, and things of that nature. So overall, I would say the combat system here is pretty fast-paced and fun. They seem to have put a lot of effort into keeping you into the action, as a game with this aesthetic likely would, all against the backdrop of our characters trying to meet their own goals. And while I certainly won't spoil that here in this early preview, yes, there is an actual story behind the scenes, but I'll leave that live for now. Last but not least, in between various missions, we will be able to rest up in a sort of hub, talking to people, getting opinions, advancing certain stories, learning more about things. You can even get hints about the next upcoming level. So far, so good. Honestly, I'm pretty positive on this game from what I've played for it, though there are a few things I do want to mention that are general concerns at the moment. For starters, the enemy AI does not seem particularly bright. I noticed that they prioritize getting into cover most of the time, which makes it relatively easy to lure them into the range of an explosive barrel, or in that railroad section example, it was real easy to just get them to end their turn on the railroad tracks when they very easily could have moved. And then the other half being the more dynamic aspect of the combat and how well that winds up being balanced. I didn't get to experience a ton of it here, and over the course of doing the full review, I'll have more to say on this, but the showrunner, the guy running the show, is supposed to dynamically help either you or your opponents depending on your performance. And that's the kind of thing that, if tuned in a very specific way, I think has the potential to be fun, but depending on exactly how involved and what the showrunner actually does, it could wind up being more of a headache than it is fun, which I imagine will also come down to the difficulty you're on a little bit. But that aspect of the game is supposed to change dynamically, giving the game some replay value. And the game itself is probably looking at like the 15 to 20 hour range, which isn't bad for a TRPG if anything. But I think that is where we will wrap it up for now. Overall, I like what I see for Showgunners. While I wouldn't say any particular aspect of the game is unique, it does blend all of them together in a really unique way that makes it fun to engage with and fun to mess around with. So I think it certainly has some potential, and I'm looking forward to playing more of it, which we won't have to wait long for, as again, this is releasing on May 2nd. Though best I can tell, it is only releasing on Steam, as everything I've seen mentioned anywhere only mentions Steam. That is all I've got for you guys. I certainly hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of the game down below, which of course means like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.